When I heard the news that Brian Niccol was leaving Chipotle for Starbucks, I was surprised. The former Chipotle CEO had done a great job turning that company around from its disasters in 2015, 2016 with all the E. coli outbreaks. Still, Chipotle has been a better business compared to Starbucks in the last 5 years. But now with the leadership change, which one is the better stock to buy, Chipotle or Starbucks? This is a great time to make this comparison among these two quick service restaurant retailers with the huge CEO change at the top. So let's take a look.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.
So I'm going to compare these two across a critical financial metrics including revenue, profit margins, cash flow, valuation, and what Wall Street thinks of these two companies going forward the next 5 years to come to my conclusion on which one I think is the better investment for long-term buyers. Let's start with revenue growth. And according to this metric, Chipotle surpassed Starbucks in the latest quarter with 18.22% year-over-year revenue growth compared to negative 0.59% for Starbucks. And you can start to see why Starbucks was looking for a change and was desperate for a change and was willing to pay a king's ransom to get the former Chipotle CEO to come over to join Starbucks. Starbucks had been plagued with executional challenges, and the leadership at the top had been questioned for some time. Even the former CEO, Howard Schultz, complained about the leadership at Starbucks. So this change at Starbucks was not surprising, but what was surprising was them being able to bring Brian Niccol over from Chipotle, because Brian Niccol had been having so much success at Chipotle. It was surprising that he would change over to Starbucks. But given the handsome pay package he received to go over, that was not surprising that he would actually go over if you're paid that much money, which reports suggest was close to $100 million all in when the switch is completed and over vesting over a period of time. But before this latest divergence here, starting in late 2023, you can see Starbucks and Chipotle had been demonstrating similar revenue growth. They are both increasing, they were, I should say, increasing comparable store sales growth, and they were adding new locations every year. However, Chipotle's growth had been focused in the United States in its domestic market, whereas Starbucks had mostly saturated domestic markets and its growth was focused more internationally. And Starbucks is facing significant competition in China, and the Chinese market, the macroeconomy is not doing as well, and so it's facing big headwinds there in that growth plan. Similarly, if we look at their operating profit margins, they were close, right? With Chipotle making huge progress since 2021, surpassing Starbucks in operating profit margins of 17.35% compared to 15.05% for Starbucks. Starbucks management had long expressed its goal of reaching closer to 20% operating profit margin. However, its plan to reach those goals haven't really come to fruition in the last 5 years. They've been up and down, but mostly still around beneath 16%, whereas Chipotle had demonstrated meaningful, progress upward. So Chipotle, like I mentioned at the top of the video, had the better business. They were executing better. They were serving their customers better. They were raising wages, raising prices. They had a strong core following. Starbucks had not been doing that in the last 5 years. They'd struggled. There was a lot of complaints from customers, complaints from workers, complaints from shareholders. The company wasn't living up to its potential, living up to the power of the brand that was built over decades. Now, looking ahead, Wall Street was not very optimistic about Starbucks earnings per share growth expectations. According to the Wall Street analysts that are following Starbucks, they think its earnings per share will be 7.65% per year over the next 5 years. Now, with the new CEO at the helm, I suspect this earnings per share growth will be revised higher. I think Brian Niccol will do a lot to bring growth to Starbucks. And I think growth rates of above double digits are now completely possible for Starbucks, where previously I would have said, yeah, this is about right. Between 7 to 9% growth is what you can expect from Starbucks EPS with the current trajectory. But now, with the new CEO and the evidence I've seen of the success, I can expect a little bit better EPS growth from Starbucks going forward. And I can say the opposite for Chipotle. The analysts on Wall Street were expecting Chipotle to grow earnings per share by 21.17% over the next 5 years. And now, with the CEO change, the abrupt CEO change, I suspect this is going to be revised downward. I don't think the company is going to grow EPS as quickly as was expected before the leadership change. Remember, this was not a planned change, and so it's more damaging for Chipotle because now it has to make new plans, a new leader at the helm. The leader was not prepared to take the helm, and so it's all hands on deck now trying to stop the bleeding, to try and minimize the disaster for Chipotle. And make no mistake about it, this was a disaster for Chipotle. The company had a clear formula for success and was executing on that formula, and there was a long runway ahead for continued success for Chipotle. Now, with the leadership change, question marks arise. Is that long runway still available? Can they continue to execute as well as they had been in the previous 5 years? I don't know. I really don't know. And given the quality of leadership from Brian Niccol, I think there's going to be a downgrade in performance because it's hard to find leaders as good as Brian Niccol. It's hard to find CEOs as good as Brian Niccol. Now let's compare the two on cash flow from operations to sales. And again, they're very close, 17.83% for Starbucks and 17.61% for Chipotle. But the big difference being that Chipotle had been on an upward trajectory while Starbucks had been on a downward trajectory, right? So you can see that here in the trend lines. With the leadership change, I wouldn't be surprised if that changes. If Starbucks goes from downward trajectory to a more flat and then upward trajectory in improving the cash flow from operations to sales, because the brand is so powerful. They have so many customers that like to go to Starbucks repeatedly. The app has done a great job in improving the execution of the business in terms of per store profitability, per employee productivity, but they need to make some improvements in execution. They need to make improvements in expansion. They need to make improvements in the relationship with customers now that customers are ordering on the app more often. So they've got to make some improvements. And Brian Niccol at Chipotle had done an excellent job with customer engagement through digital channels. That's one of the reasons why Chipotle's found so much success over the previous 5 years is because of that digital strategy. Starbucks tried that digital strategy, but it didn't work as well as Chipotle's digital strategy. And so that CEO's primary skill set, or one of Niccol's primary skill sets was in the digital channels. He will undoubtedly bring that over to Starbucks, and Starbucks will begin to benefit from a better digital strategy, which is one area of significant weakness from the coffee giant. And finally, let's compare the two on valuation. And if you remember the video I made about the CEO change when I discussed the news, one of the reasons I discussed that I had Starbucks rated as a buy and Chipotle, rated as a hold instead of being rated as a buy was because of the valuation. Chipotle stock had been very expensive. Chipotle was one of those stocks that I've been following for the last 6, 7, 8, 9 years or so, and I haven't really had it rated as a buy for any meaningful part of time because the stock price had been so expensive. But it was an excellent business, and I talked about how great of a business it was with a great leader at the helm. But the stock was just persistently expensive when looking at the valuation. Starbucks, however, I've had rated as a buy. And the reason being was that it was trading at a relatively cheap valuation, especially considering the opportunities ahead. So now, especially with the leadership change, if I had to pick one of these two stocks to buy, I wouldn't want to pay roughly double the price for Chipotle at a forward PE of 41 when I can get Starbucks at a forward PE of 23? Especially now with one of my biggest question marks for Starbucks was leadership, was execution. Now I feel more comfortable with Starbucks leadership and execution capabilities with the better CEO coming in. So if I had to pick between these two today, I would pick Starbucks, and I would pick Starbucks ahead of Chipotle by a large margin. If you liked the video you just saw and you want to see more just like it, please subscribe to the channel. I can't keep this channel free without the support of viewers like you. And if you're already subscribed, thank you, and I appreciate your support.